I cannot believe that it is almost November and I have made one single video this entire month. I have all of these ideas for videos floating in my head and I have yet to sit down and actually record them. Part of it is because I'm busy. I'm currently in birthday party mode because our son is turning 4. He is having a Mickey Mouse birthday party and I'm making a giant Mickey Mouse banner with like 16 different characters on it, and the thing is huge. We have a 6-foot kitchen table and it is taking up every single inch of the table. So I have been working nonstop on that since Saturday. Actually, I might have started on it. No, I started on it Saturday morning. All of the drawing, and I am finishing up the painting hopefully by today because Mama is exhausted. Then we will be cleaning house and we will be cooking food and prepping for a birthday party this weekend. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But all of this birthday party prep and also preparing for like the fall festival at church and things like that, getting ready for Halloween costumes and stuff like that, has really kind of set me back on all things social media and also writing, unfortunately. But since I had a little bit of time today and I'm waiting on some paint to dry to do some outlining, thought I would sit down and I would just make a video. We're gonna ramble today. I have 0 notes in front of me. I don't necessarily know where this is gonna go, but I'm gonna try to make a video about my writing process, how I manage to write with kids, and also things that I do to help my writing process move forward and what I do to help while I'm drafting. So those are some of the things that we're gonna kind of look at today in this video. When I think about story crafting, I think about the beginning pieces of a story, like when you start the brainstorming and when you hit the end of the first draft. That's what I consider the crafting portion of story crafting. Anything after that is tweaking, publishing, marketing. They all have their own section. But as far as the creative process goes and the creating process, that is the drafting portion where you're writing your first draft, maybe even writing your second draft, depending on how many rewrites you have to do. Could be also considered part of your story crafting. Once I get into edits, I consider that my story tweaking, as in I already have the bulk of the story already crafted. I'm just taking some pieces and I'm just rearranging the pieces to fit and to make the puzzle, the finished puzzle. So my process might look different than your process. It's gonna look different than somebody else's process, and that's okay. The beauty of being an author and the beauty of being a writer is that everybody has their own process and everybody has what works for them. Something I saw on Threads this week was that writing rules are not hard and fast rules. So somebody might say, this is a writing rule. You have to write like this. I think the example used in the thread was, don't edit as you go because it's going to mess up your story flow. Well, I have done both things, and I will tell you right now, editing as you go and not editing as you go are going to give you a similar result. Your story is still going to end up exactly the same as it would have. So the process of editing while I go does not work very well for me, so I don't do it, but I know a lot of other authors that that's the only way they can do it. So, you know, you have to do what works for you. I have to do what works for me. That's the beauty of the writing process. So while I'm telling you my story crafting process, and I'm just going to go through this process of like the beginning piece of what sparks a story idea until the end of the first draft, because I don't necessarily want to get into like all the self-editing and all that stuff right now. My process for that is still tweaking and learning, but I do feel like I have my drafting process, my beginning process pretty well down now that I'm working on my 4th book. So where it starts for me is this random idea, this random piece of something that says, ooh, that would make a really good story. And then I take that idea and I just think about it. I know that's very vague, but I do. I literally, like you would stick a steak in some marinade and put it in the fridge, that's what I do with my story idea. I stick it in my metaphorical brain fridge and I let it marinate for days and days and weeks and weeks. I would not do that with a steak, but I do that with my story ideas. I put it in there and I let it sit and I think about it and I come up with all of these crazy, irrational ideas. Thankfully, I write fantasy, so anything crazy and irrational can be put into the story and it still makes sense. But I like to go all out. I like to think way outside of the box, even if it doesn't work or it's not going to work or it's not going to end up in the final draft. I don't care. This is my chance to think about all of the possibilities. Some of the things I come up with, I push aside to save for later books. I try to write down a lot of what I brainstorm so that I have it, but that doesn't always work. I am considering starting a brainstorming journal where I just brainstorm ideas and I just throw them on the paper. They don't even have to be neat. They don't even have to be in the lines. They can just be brainstorming ideas on a piece of paper, and then I can come back to it at any point and be like, oh yeah, that seemed like a really fun story idea. So I will give some examples throughout this process from the book that I'm working on now, which is kind of going to give you some pieces that I haven't really revealed to the world yet, but I am really excited to start talking about it, so I felt like it's now or never, basically. So this story idea started out with a trip to the beach. My family took a trip to the beach with my husband's family, and we went to this place, this harbor in Destin, Florida, and they have a actual pirate ship. It's supposed to be an authentic pirate ship down to like scale and everything, and it's a ride. It's a boat ride. You pay money, you get on the pirate ship. It's basically a pirate adventure on the bay water on the Emerald Beach, and it looked like so much fun. We didn't get to do it because we were doing something else that day, but we did get to ride our boat past the pirate ship, and it was so much fun to look at. And just, I love the beach. I love the water. I love all things about the ocean. I love learning about the ocean. I probably would never dive in the ocean because I'm one of those that only goes about ankle deep before I'm turning around and headed back to the beach. But I do love to be in the presence of the ocean. I think it's beautiful. I think it's mesmerizing. It's very, I don't know, it just inspires me in so many different ways, and that's sort of where this story came from. I saw the pirate ship and I'm like, oh, I have to write a pirate story. I have to do it. It looks like so much fun. I have to do it. But I didn't want it to just be a typical pirate story where they're searching for treasure to steal and to spend and to be rich and famous and whatever. I wanted my story to be something different. So my characters are going to be doing something different. They're still going on a treasure hunt, but they're not going on a treasure hunt for their own personal gain. And I think that's going to put a new dynamic into the story. I'm really excited to see where it goes. But that was my first little inkling and idea of where I wanted this story to go. So after I got that piece of information, I started sitting on that story. Now, I was trying to work on other things. At the time, I really wanted to write a series about superheroes, and I found out very quickly into the first draft of the first book that science fiction is not really my cup of tea to write. I love to read science fiction. I think it's interesting, and it has all these different dynamics and pieces that fantasy sort of has, but in like a different way. I can't really explain it, but I didn't like writing science fiction. I love the aspects of fantasy, the very creative and just unlike our world type of things, otherworldly things that you can put in fantasy that just make it more fun to me, and I wasn't getting to do that with a superhero series. I also was struggling with marketing because apparently the market for superheroes is about this big, very slim, very, very slim. And although marketing isn't the whole thing, and I know that I should be writing stories for myself, not for other people, I just got very discouraged with it, and I got very discouraged with the story to the point of stopping. I decided to just put it to the side. But when I put it to the side, the good Lord brought my pirate story back into my brain and said, "Ooh, Danielle, that's it. That's the one. That's the one I want you to write right now." So I took my little pirate idea and I was mulling it over in my head, letting it, like I said, sit in my metaphorical brain fridge up here and marinate. And as I was doing that, this concept of what if it happened in a historical time period popped up. And that idea came from a trip to Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia. My husband took me on a little bit of a late birthday trip. It was actually our first solo trip without kids. Probably won't happen again for a while, but it was a lot of fun. We went for like a long weekend. He was working on a job up in Maryland, and he had to go to the job site for one day, and then we spent the next 3 days exploring all around the area. And I have been to Williamsburg before. I was very young. I think I was like 7 or 8 when we went, so I was young. But I do remember bits and pieces about the trip and how much fun I had. So when I finally convinced him to go, I was just super excited. And when we got there, I was like, oh, I wonder if I could write a fantasy story set in the Revolutionary War colonial time period, because I love that time period. And when people say that's their Roman Empire, that's my Roman Empire, is the colonial era. I love all aspects of it leading up to the American Revolution, leading up to the Declaration of Independence, how our country became its own thing, separating from Great Britain. Like, all of this history has always been very fascinating to me. And so I got that little snippet, the light bulb went off in my head, and I guess the timer went off in my fridge here and said, oh, that's it. That's how you're gonna make it. So then my story started. I started brainstorming my story. The brainstorming process for me is the longest process of writing. It's also my favorite. As I mentioned before, I love to get really creative in my brainstorming process. I love to really just go out of the box. Anything and everything, there's nothing off the table. It's going to be wild. My brainstorming ideas are always nuts. And 90% of the time, they do not make it to the final cut, but that's okay. During my brainstorming process, I mashed together my pirate idea and my historical idea. And now my characters are hunting treasure to help fund the Revolutionary War to get out from under Great Britain's control and the king. So there goes my idea and how the story came about. Currently in my drafting portion, my characters are on the boat hunting for the treasure. There's a lot of lore. There's going to be a lot of oceanic things. We're going to be going to the Bermuda Triangle, so that's going to be a lot of fun to come up with too, with all of the fantasy and the lore and mythology around the Bermuda Triangle. So I'm really excited about that too. But anyways, once I feel like I have enough brainstorming done, I start coming up with my character names. Now, sometimes this happens just very naturally in my brainstorming process. Just coming up with a name that just fits the vibe. Like, oh, hey, this name just sounds absolutely perfect with this story. Sometimes I have to really think of a name. But in this case, my character names came very quickly and very easily. And also my settings came very quickly and easily as well, just because of where the major pieces of the American Revolution were located. in the original 13 colonies. It was really easy to pick a setting, and since I already had a time period, that was pretty simple and easy for me to do. But this story has created a lot of research for me, which is not something that I'm used to. So when I wrote my trilogy, I didn't have to do a lot of research because it was basically epic fantasy, but like young adult version, really dumbed down kind of fantasy. Like it was not Brandon Sanderson, J.R.R. Tolkien level epic fantasy. It was, a lot less intense, but it didn't take very much research at all. Like maybe a couple things I had to Google here and there, but most of it was all just made up in my head, and it worked. It was great. This, on the other hand, has been a different monster because I'm trying to stay very true to the historical time period, but also keep it fantasy at the same time. So that has created a little bit of a different dynamic in my drafting process as opposed to what I'm used to. It is not a bad thing. I have had a lot of fun researching all of this stuff, a lot of historical things, a lot of pirate things, because I'm not well versed on like ship etiquette or like parts of a ship or like pirate terms, pirate names. I'd really had to come up with like a ship name and all these pirate crews. I had to get their ranks, things like that. That also is a part of my story creation process, but it happens alongside the drafting portion. So now that I'm done brainstorming and everything, once I feel like I have a really good direction for it and I know where I want to start, I immediately start writing. I am not a plotter. There is not an ounce of me that loves being a plotter. I have tried and it doesn't work for me. I cannot make an outline. Number one, I don't stick to it. Number two, I feel like I have to stick to it, and then I get creatively drained because I can't stick to it. And number three, I tend to come up with things on the fly. So when I've already come up with my process or what's going to happen, I'm not really excited about writing it because I feel like I've already discovered it. So, well, it's not really that fun anymore. But the sun just went behind a cloud and made it a little dark in here. My goodness. But when I am flying by the seat of my pants and I am writing as a pantser, which is what we in the author community call it, I feel like I am doing the best thing ever. Like, I feel like I'm discovering the story alongside the readers discovering the story, and it is so much fun. That's how I've always written, even when I was a little girl and I was just making up stories, whatever, about my little horse over here. I never outlined. I couldn't do it because I wanted to discover the story too. So I write by discovery. I'm a discovery writer. I am a pantser, whatever you want to call it. I don't have a set outline. I do write down things as I go. So when I'm editing or if I'm writing subsequent books, like later sequels and things, I have this information, this foreshadowing information to use for later. But for the most part, I don't worry about plotting anything before I start writing. I sit down with my character names and my settings and my general plot idea and I get to work. The very first thing I do is write the first line. That sounds very silly to say out loud, but if you aren't a writer and you don't know, there are actually a lot of authors that start in random places. I am not one of those. I am a chronological writer. I start at the beginning, I end at the ending, and that's how I have to do it. Part of that is because I am a pantser, and so my discovery writing does not allow me to just start in random places, start with my favorite pieces, and that works great for some people, but for me, I feel like if I wrote all of my favorite and most exciting pieces first, I wouldn't want to go back in and write sort of the more boring pieces, or, you know, the pieces leading up to the action, the tension, I wouldn't want to do all that. So by writing chronological, I'm making myself get through those slow moments so that I can get to the big stuff, so I can really dramatize the climax of the story, make it this big epic thing that I'm visualizing in my head. And that's what I want to do. That's how I have to draft. But that is basically my process from the first pieces of a story until I get to the end of my draft. I research while I'm writing because I am a discovery writer. So if I come across something and I'm like, oh, where on the ship are they standing? I need to pull up my anatomy of a pirate ship that I have saved on my computer. And I just look at my little sketch with everything all outlined, and that's where I go from there. Same with like dates. This book has been a lot of fun to work with dates because I'm wanting dates to line up with historical accuracy. So I've been doing a lot of research on the different dates of the big events. Let's just say it's gonna coincide like almost directly with the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the beginning of the Revolutionary War. So I am actually really, really excited about all of this. It's going to be a fantastic book. I am going to be giving a title reveal next month. Yeah, because this is still October. I'm going to be doing it in November, but I'm going to be doing it for my newsletter subscribers only. So my website has my newsletter link, so you can subscribe to my newsletter. So just make sure you visit there if you want to catch the title of my work in progress before I release it on social media, which I probably will not do until December. I have had the title and I also have a cover. And I'm sitting on all this information and it's driving me nuts. But also, I'm trying not to rush through things this time because I do feel like I rushed through a lot of my trilogy. And I wish I would have taken time to build some more suspense and get more people excited about my reveals before I actually did them. So that's what I'm doing this time. I'm going to start doing some heavy marketing over the next few weeks to get people to sign up to my newsletter and go see the title and the blurb for this book, because I'm also working on writing that as well after my son's birthday party. The next thing we're going to talk about is how I managed to do all this with kids. So, if you don't know, I have 3 kids. My oldest is about to turn 4. My middle is 2, and my baby is about to be 4 months old. So I am busy. I am a very busy mom. I am a stay-at-home mom. If you can't tell by the toys, you can't see it, but I'm literally surrounded by toys. Let's see, I've got a hat, I've got a foam block, and I've got a blanket, because my bookshelf, my library of books, is the same room as our homeschool room. It's the same room as their playroom. It's also the same room that has my desk where I do most of my writing. Now, you're probably wondering, how on earth does this girl manage to get any writing done with 3 small kids and also do social media and all the things? And let me just tell you, it's a balancing act. It's not always fun or easy to do all the things. So most days I'm very exhausted by the end of the day. But number one, my kids come first. So my writing, my social media, it all comes after my kids. I want to make sure their needs are met before I'm doing my own thing. So that is very important to me. But also, I spend this time of the day in the afternoon when all 3 kids lay down. The baby naps every single day at this time. The older 2 don't always nap, but I do make them lay down for about an hour and a half, just depending on how tired or aggravated and ill that they might have been that day. I make them lay down and take a rest. Sometimes they have their iPads, you know, sometimes they play together in their rooms. Sometimes they do actually take a nap, but them actually taking a nap is rare and doesn't happen often. But that's when I sit down at my desk or on the couch. That's when I do my writing. I like to do work in the morning before they get up if I have time, or in the afternoon when they're resting. If my husband has to work late, I will do it after I put them to bed at night, or if he's out of town. But most of the time, he's rarely out of town these days. So most of the time when he's home in the afternoons, I don't do any writing. I will read. So I consider reading as part of like my research for Storycraft, and I read a lot of similar books to what I write. I also read outside of my genre so that I can just get like a feel for good story crafting, good character development. You know, I really study other authors' story structure and stuff like that. I've been reading a lot of Brandon Sanderson lately, and that has actually been a huge help for my writing process because I've really got to see what world building looks like from a more epic fantasy standpoint. Yeah, I like epic fantasy, but I haven't read a lot of it. So now that I've been reading it and really focusing on it, it's really helped me a lot with coming up with stuff. But as far as doing my research and doing my writing and things, I try to do it when the kids are playing by themselves. Sometimes they have really good independent play days where they'll just play by themselves without needing my attention too much, and I will write in little short bursts while they're awake. But most of the time I spend nap time and rest time or in the morning before they wake up working as much as I can. I try to get anywhere from 100 to 1,000 words in the day if I can. But I don't write every single day because, like I said, my kids' needs come first. I want to make sure that my kids are taken care of before I'm writing, because my writing is secondary right now while they're still so very young and they need me for practically everything. The last thing I want to talk about in today's video are things that I do to help my writing process along, especially while I'm in the drafting process. These sometimes work in the editing process, but that's a whole different like animal, ball game, whatever you want to say. I will do a video about my editing process later when I'm actually in my editing process. For right now, I'm drafting, so I'm really thinking about my drafting process. That's why I'm talking about it. Okay, so there are 3 main things that I like to do to really help my writing process along. One of them is writing sprints. I think part of the reason I'm able to write in little short bursts when my kids are awake is because of writing sprints. So I'll talk about that in just a minute. The second thing is listening to music. I love to listen to music anyways. So listening to music is sort of a thing that helps me get into my story and helps me really get motivated. And number 3 is something else that I've mentioned earlier, is reading good books. All right, so writing sprints. I know a lot of authors who do writing sprints, and they do them on like live videos and stuff like that. They do them together. They do them by themselves. This is a habit that I picked up from participating in NaNoWriMo back before all of the controversial things. I love writing sprints because it makes me sit down and it makes me focus on my manuscript and I'm not distracted. Another thing, it's sort of like with exercise where you tell yourself, I'll just do the first 10 minutes and then if I'm still not feeling it, I'll stop. And usually when I do that with exercise or with writing, I do that first 10 minutes and then I'm like, oh, hey, I can keep going. So that's usually what happens. I will do a 10-minute sprint and I'm like, you know what? I'm really invested in this piece of the story. Let me do another writing sprint. So the way that looks for me is I will take 5 minutes when I first sit down. I take 5 minutes and I sort of like read over what I wrote last. I sort of discuss in my head what needs to happen next. I might write it down, I might not, it just depends. But I will read like the last paragraph or whatever to try to get a feel for where I was at in the story when I left off last. It's been over a week since I've written anything, so when I do, once this birthday party is over this weekend and I sit back down to actually work again, I'm gonna have to probably read the last chapter just because it's been a while since I've actually worked, and I'm gonna need to take some time to go back over that. After I take my 5 minutes to read over what I'm doing, I set a timer on my phone, my laptop, whatever, and I write for 10 minutes, 10 to 15, depending on the day. Most of the times it's 10 minutes because I like that 5 minutes break, 10 minutes writing. So while I'm in my 10-minute writing sprint, I do not look at my phone unless I get a phone call. I try not to, do anything. Obviously, if the kids need something and they're awake, or if something happens while they're playing, like I have to get up and go tend to them. Sometimes I have to stop because the baby wakes up and he gets hungry. That is fine. But usually if it's anything other than an emergency or the kids, I'm going to sit down and I'm not going to look at anything else but my computer screen and my keyboard for 10 minutes. That concept of not being distracted is why I really like writing sprints, because distraction is the number one enemy against finishing a draft. You can ask any author. We tend to get distracted very easily, and usually that's not because we don't want to work on our project, but it's just because we know that once we get started, we're going to get sucked in and it's going to be hard to get us out. But anyways, once my 10 minutes is over, I take a 5-minute break, and I take that 5 minutes to go get a drink, run to the restroom, check my phone if I need to, if it's not an emergency, whatever. And then after the 5 minutes is over, I will set a timer again for 10 minutes. I like to do this in like 2-hour stretches if I can. And I say if I can loosely because being a stay-at-home mom to 3 kids makes it very difficult to do long sets of writing sprints. So normally I will just do like little short bursts like I've talked before. I'll do about 10 minutes and then I'll go take 20 to 30 minutes and do something else. I'll come back and I'll do 15 minutes. I have to manage my time in different ways because not only do I take care of the kids, but I also take care of our home. So, I have to clean, I do laundry, I do dishes. So I try to do things in between writing sprints if I'm needing to finish a draft quickly. If not, I wait until rest time and I sit down and I write and I do nothing else. But writing sprints are a fabulous way to help you get more words on the page and keep you from getting distracted. That's one of my favorite ways to stay focused on my project and not get too distracted. So I highly recommend writing sprints. If you've never done them before, you can ask a friend. You can send me a message on Instagram and I will gladly do writing sprints with you. We can set up a time. We can do them together. We can do them on live. I don't care. I think writing sprints are a great way to get writing done. So I really love to do them as well. The second thing that I really like is music. Music can be a little, I don't want to say controversial because it's not really controversial, but there's like mixed opinions about using music as a motivator. I do not listen to typical music. When I say that, I mean music with words is not something that I listen to on a regular basis. I have playlist after playlist after playlist of movie scores. I actually have a playlist for each of my books. I have a playlist for just my favorite movie scores. I have a playlist for all the movie scores that, the whole albums. So I'll watch a movie and hear one song on it, and I'll go add the whole album to that playlist. Having Apple Music is a huge lifesaver when it comes to this kind of stuff, because I would be broke trying to download music from these movies that I love so much. This concept of movie scores and writing originated, you're gonna love this, when I wrote fan fiction. I'm only laughing because I know that a bunch of other authors have done the same thing. I know Victoria Aveyard, she used to write fan fiction a lot. She talks about it all the time, about how that was how she got her start and how she realized how much she loved writing. And she is fully supportive of fan fiction. She thinks it's a great thing. She thinks everybody should write fan fiction to, help practice their craft, grow in confidence in writing and all that stuff. But what started it is the books and movies that inspired me to write fan fiction was the Chronicles of Narnia. That's actually how I met one of my best friends, because we both wrote Chronicles of Narnia fan fiction. So Jane, if you're watching this, I'm so glad we met over writing, and I'm so excited because now we're both published authors, and it's just cool to see how that's all happened. But one of the things that I loved about those movies was the music, and the composer for the first two Chronicles of Narnia movies was Harry Gregson Williams, and he is a fantastic composer. The music for those movies just blew me away. It just captured the magic for me, and when I listened to it, even today, having listened to those songs 100 times, I could probably hum them for you right now. I won't. I'll spare you. But just having heard them so much, I still get chills from how much magic it just feels magical in that music. Like, it's just amazing how it captured the Chronicles of Narnia for me. So listening to that kind of music is very, very inspiring for me. And I don't just listen to the Chronicles of Narnia. I have huge lists. My current project, a lot of the music comes from Pirates of the Caribbean, from How to Train Your Dragon. I have some from the Chronicles of Narnia. I have some from, different movies, different TV shows. It all just depends. But listening to movie scores kind of pulls magic from the visual of my head. Like, I've seen these movies, I can visualize these movies, and I can take that music and I can just picture my own scenes, from my books happening. And it's just amazing to me how my brain correlates that music and turns the words that I'm imagining in my head into these vivid scenes. But I'm also like a very imaginative person. I'm one of those that when I read, I don't know the actual term for it. I really should find out, but I'm one of those that I can read and I can like picture it in my head. So I'm very visual, like I can visualize things, and that really helps a lot by listening to the music and writing at the same time. And I do listen to this music while I write. I don't always, because, I'm a mom, so sometimes my background noise is kids talking, playing, watching cartoons, whatever. Sometimes my background noise is kids. Sometimes my background noise is movie scores. It just depends on the day and depends on what I'm doing. The last thing that really helps my writing, that I have found helps improve my writing, is reading good books. You're going to hear pretty much every author talk about this. Any big author is going to talk about this. Even us little authors, we're going to say it too, because reading is valuable. You can't learn how to tell a good story if you don't read good stories. And I think that there is a lot of benefit to reading books in your same genre, but also reading books outside of your genre. So I write fantasy. I did tell you earlier that I tried to write science fiction, but it just did not work for me. I write fantasy, but I read in a multitude of genres. I read romance, historical romance, rom-coms. I read science fiction. I read thrillers. I read mysteries. I read cozy books. I don't read horror or paranormal. I try to stay away from those because I'm a chicken and I can't read them. Like, my husband was gifted his grandmother's Stephen King books, and they're sitting on our bookshelves, and I can't read them because Stephen King really just, I don't know, his storytelling just freaks me out. I've tried, I can't do it, so I just have moved on. But I do really love reading outside of my genre as well as in my genre, because I get sort of a feel for good storytelling. You can read a thriller and you can get, tips for building tension, because thrillers are so good at building tension. You can read a romance, and that can really help you with aspects of romantic relationships and building those romantic relationships from start to finish. And I know romantasy is a huge genre right now, subgenre, I should say. That's actually what my next book is in, is romantasy. So having read a bunch of romances on top of fantasies is really helping me build that romantic tension that I need, but also the fantasy tension, and also a little bit of thriller and a little bit of mystery. And, all genres have a little bit of each other in them. So if you only ever read fantasy and you're trying to write romance, you're never going to get it. You're never going to be able to do it. But also, if you only ever read fantasy and you're still trying to write fantasy, your writing might be lacking because you're not reading other things outside of your genre to kind of help you build story structure and help you understand character development from different points of view, from different aspects. A character in a thriller is going to have different things pushed on them that's going to cause them to react in different ways. But what happens if, there's someone after someone in this thriller, and then someone's after someone in this fantasy? You don't know how to build the tension here without reading something like this. So being able to read in different genres and read good books in different genres is really important to me. So I love to continue reading while I'm writing. I know there are some authors who can't do that, so they don't write while they're drafting. They wait until after they're done drafting. But I'm the opposite. I have to read something while I'm drafting. And believe it or not, my writing style doesn't end up matching whoever I'm reading at the time. And I think that's just because I've kind of figured out my own writing voice over the years. Because even though I've only been published for a year, I've still been, I've still been writing for a really long time. So since I've been writing all this time, I've kind of found my writing voice, my pace of storytelling, things like that. But being able to read books while I write is helpful for me. It helps me stay on the track of the storytelling mindset, because I am a mom, so I have like different things pulling at my brain in different directions and things like that. So when I'm reading, it keeps me focused on storytelling instead of pulling me away from it. It pulls me back toward it. You might not be able to do that, but that's okay. Part of the writing process is being able to do trial and error, try different things. If it doesn't work, you can always go back and do it the way you did before. It never hurts to try something different just to see if you like it, or to see if it helps, see if it, keeps you out of a writer slump or a writer's block or things like that. I do have tips for helping get out of a writer's block, but I will share them at a different time because I'm already almost creeping up on 45 minutes of talking here, and I probably should stop. But thanks everybody for coming and listening to me ramble about my writing process. I do have a lot more to share. I have videos I want to make on like characters and other books and breaking down story structure in other people's writing, and maybe even going through like what inspired me to write my trilogy. And I would love to bring y'all along for like a write-a-thon and things like that. Maybe a read-a-thon, since I'm trying to read The Cosmere by Brandon Sanderson. That would be a fun YouTube video. But anyways, thank y'all for coming and listening to me ramble. If you got even the tiniest bit of information from me and thought it was useful, please just let me know and share a little love in the comments. Since I'm so new to YouTube, I don't really have any followers or any subscribers yet. So I would love it if you could just, subscribe, give me a comment, help me get some engagement, things like that. And also you can follow me on socials. You can follow me on my website. You can, subscribe to my newsletter. Anything that you would like. I have different ways of getting in touch with me. Also different ways to keep up with me and my projects. I'm going to be doing a lot of reveals very soon for my next project. So make sure you stick around so you'll get to see all about this historical fantasy romantasy that I'm working on with, the American Revolution. So thanks guys. I'll be back hopefully soon with more videos. Hopefully it won't take me another month to make videos and upload them. But have a great Tuesday.